But if it comes down to it, will I be prepared to stay here and fight to protect Taiwan, to protect Taiwan's freedom and democracy? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Allan. This is my life in Taiwan, and welcome here, joining me on my regular daily morning walk around Wenshin Forest Park here in the beautiful Nantun district of my adoptive home city of Taichung. And as I was walking around, I was catching up on some YouTube videos. I actually watched Prozzie's video talking about the possibility of an invasion from China and whether or not he would stay and fight and pick up a gun, or if he would run off scampering like the cowardly Canadian that he is. Now, I'm not going to spoil his video and give you the answer that he gave, but if you want to go check out his more nuanced political, sociological view of the situation, there's a link up in the corner. But reading the comments on that video showed me that there's a huge variety in the opinions of what people think foreigners should do in that situation. And I was surprised to see a lot of Taiwanese people commenting that the foreigners here would be much better escaping, getting out of the country, going back to your home countries in what essentially would be a war zone at that point. So I thought it would be a little bit remiss of me not to have my say on the situation, especially what has happened in Ukraine recently has sparked interest in Taiwan China relations once again, and has got people discussing the possibility of whether or not President Xi Jinping is going to follow his friend Putin's example and start invading countries nearby unnecessarily. So while my video may not have the political nuance of Prozzie's, nor will it have the fun and food of some of my more recent videos, what I do promise it will have is my very personal, some might say selfish opinion on the situation. So if I say something you disagree with, or indeed if I say something you do agree with, then please use the comments down below to have your say, and I promise that I will get back to every single comment, whether in English or Chinese, as I know everybody has their own personal opinion on this, and I want everybody's opinion to be valued whether you agree with me or not. It is a scorcher today. But yes, before we get into my answer on whether I would stay and fight, let's get into a little bit of details about how likely a possible invasion would be. And here is where my opinion might get me a bit of trouble or a lot of criticism, because I used to think that the possibility of an invasion was almost non-existent. But seeing what President Putin is capable of over in Ukraine has really started to make me think about the possibility of something similar happening here. President Xi has said very clearly that unification must be fulfilled. 祖国完全统一的历史任务一定要实现，也一定 And up until now, up until recently, most people have generally ignored him and just continued on with the status quo. As long as Taiwan continues the way that we have been doing and doesn't claim independence, which we basically have anyway, then nothing will change. There'll be no invasion and everybody will be happy. They say Taiwan is part of China and they strongly believe it. We say no, we're not, and we strongly believe it. And while the situation between Russia and Ukraine is of course completely different, the recent invasion there by President Putin was completely unjustified, and any invasion here in Taiwan would be equally as unjustified. But of course, presidents like Xi and Putin don't care what is justified. They literally do what they want and what is best for their legacy. They are power-hungry, crazy dictators that just don't think the same way that people like me and you do. Their mentality is just so different. We cannot predict what they're going to do next. In mine and Prozzie's podcast channel, which is the sponsor of today's video, by the way, I have said recently that maybe one day Xi Jinping just wakes up in a bad mood, hungover, has an argument with one of his wives, and just decides that today is the day to press that big red button. Of course, it's much more complicated than that, and Ukraine's defense of itself should be some kind of warning to China that smaller countries don't just bend over and give up so easily.
The Ukrainians may not have the air power, but they have the will, the determination, and the heart, and they have inflicted huge damages on the Russian soldiers.
Xi certainly doesn't want a failed invasion of Taiwan as part of that aforementioned legacy that he really wants to protect. So it is possible that the Ukraine situation is actually helping to delay an invasion here, or at least making Xi think twice before sending any of his troops. So basically, how likely is a Chinese invasion of Taiwan? In my opinion, wasn't so likely now has become a little more likely. But as for a time frame as to when, well, there's only one guy that can answer that question. So let's say an invasion starts tomorrow, what happens? Well, there's a plethora of amazing, interesting videos already on YouTube detailing military plans, comparing the two armies and navies, and the possible worst case scenarios. Definitely go check them out if that's the kind of information you're looking for. But from my personal situation, what happens? Well, of course, firstly, I'm gonna be scared. Scared for myself, of course, but also scared for every single person living here, my former students, co-workers, friends, business owners that I've visited. Every single person that lives in Taiwan is going to have their lives changed in some way, regardless of the outcome of any war that takes place. Taiwan would become a different place if that were to happen. Of course, people's lives are going to be put in danger, but the economy, the infrastructure, the education system, Taiwanese kids' views of the world are going to be changed. I would just be scared for Taiwan's future as well as for my own safety. Also, Taiwan is a young country, especially democratically, having held its first democratic election only 26 years ago. But also culturally, Taiwan is a very young country trying hard to find itself, find its identity on the world stage. At the moment, its culture is heavily influenced by other countries around Asia. China, of course, has a huge cultural influence here, but also the Japanese cultural influence is still very visible here, as well as a smattering of other pop cultures from around the world. And Taiwan is trying very hard to promote itself around the world as much more than just the place where computer chips and bubble milk tea comes from. And the more time that passes by, Taiwan is going to become more Taiwan, if that makes sense. More than just the place that isn't China, as Prozzie mentioned in his video. And any military invasion, especially a successful military invasion of Taiwan, would put an end to that country's development, to Taiwan flourishing on the world stage. Unless, of course, China come here and we absolutely kick their ass, which would do the opposite and really strengthen Taiwan's culture and identity on the world stage. But I really don't think that any country should have to go through a war in order to promote themselves and become culturally independent. But if it comes down to it, will I be prepared to stay here and fight to protect Taiwan, to protect Taiwan's freedom and democracy? Well, yes, and here's my reasons why. As I mentioned just now, Taiwan is a young country, a young democracy at the very least. And in previous videos, I've also mentioned how Taiwanese people love affirmation from other countries, whether that's the media, YouTubers such as myself, or in some cases, full diplomatic recognition from some other countries really helps to affirm Taiwan's position on the world stage. And what better way to gain the ultimate affirmation and protect that young democracy than to have people that have come here from other countries, worked in Taiwan, made lives for themselves, made a success of themselves, stand up for you and fight against what is not right. Fight against this unjustified behavior from neighboring countries. There are lots of foreigners that come here to Taiwan, make a success of themselves, then go on to other countries, to bigger and better things. But there are also lots of foreigners just like myself that come here in a difficult situation, make their lives better, make themselves a success, and try to make Taiwan a better place. They stay here, put roots here, and build Taiwan stronger. Whether that's through education, religion, business, contributing to society in some way, maybe through making YouTube videos that the world can watch and see how life works here and see how the Taiwanese people live their lives. I think there are lots of long-term foreigners here that simply morally couldn't leave and wouldn't leave and would stay here and fight if the shit hits the fan. Just like I was watching on the news recently in the Ukraine situation, where British people were going to the Ukrainian embassy to try and enroll in the Ukrainian army.
What nationality are you?
British.
And what's made you want to come here? they look like they need help.
There are people that just have a very strong moral fiber, I guess, that would fight for what they believe in. I would really try my best to stand up and be counted and show the Taiwanese people that watch my videos that my feelings and my love and my respect for this country goes much further than just words on a YouTube video. Everyone says that America or the UK would come and protect Taiwan in the case of a military invasion. Well, how can I expect the UK or USA or even NATO to come and fight for Taiwan if I wouldn't do it myself? Whether or not I would be useful or whether or not Taiwan would even accept me into the military is another question, but I would feel morally and emotionally obliged to do whatever I could for this country without sneaking away as soon as trouble comes knocking. Now, I know that many of you will be listing reasons in the comment section why I couldn't, shouldn't, or perhaps even wouldn't volunteer myself in the case of a military invasion from China, and I'm very aware of lots of those reasons. The first of which, of course, would be my son, William. Of course, I shouldn't be putting my life in danger, and I need to continue earning money to pay for his education and his future in South Africa. But what future does William and the rest of the world have if the entire planet is controlled by countries like Russia and China that can just go around pillaging and taking land away from other countries? There is no future for any of us if this kind of thing is allowed to happen. There are other fathers in the military. That cannot be the only excuse for not volunteering myself, and I'm gonna die one day anyway. I'm certainly not a spring chicken. And what would William rather have? Would he rather see his dad die from a sickness or disease in his 60s, 70s, or 80s, or a dad that died doing something that he believed was right and standing up for his adoptive country and trying to make that country proud of him? I'm fully aware that all of this is just words. It probably won't come to that. I probably will never even be accepted into any kind of military establishment, but I want people to know that in my heart of hearts, I think I would stand up and do the right thing. And just before you accuse me of making a flattering, ass-kissing video in order to gain Taiwanese people's support and trust, or maybe even just for getting views, I really want you to know that isn't the case at all. I'm fully prepared to criticize Taiwan when it comes down to it. There were several things that come into my mind when deciding if I would stand up and fight or not. One of which is the fact that Taiwan won't even give me a passport unless, of course, I jump through many different hoops and, of course, renounce my British citizenship. I know rules are rules, and I don't deserve a passport if a country doesn't want to give me one, but I do think that this is one of the reasons that many foreigners will jump ship at the first sign of any trouble here. They maybe will think, well, I lived here for 5-10 years and you didn't give me a passport, why should I stay and fight for you? Which is possibly a reasonable answer to such a situation, but I can also see that Taiwan doesn't want to go around giving out Taiwanese passports to foreigners willy-nilly, as that would also include many Chinese people that live here. And the last thing they want is the possibility of a load of Taiwanese passport holding Chinese people if a war were to break out, so it's much easier just to exclude everybody. Not sure if that's a factor, but I certainly think the spy community would be easily infiltrated if Taiwanese passports were given out so easily. One other factor that came into my mind when considering whether I would stay and fight or not would be my newfound selflessness. As I've gotten older and more mature, let's say, I've really tried to get much more selfless. Whereas in my 20s and 30s, I lived somewhat of a more selfish lifestyle, I've recently started to realize that that's not the way to live. I am trying to be a better person and try to influence others in my life a lot more positively than I did in the past. So if I was faced with this incredibly difficult question as to whether to stay and fight or not, a selfless person would probably say yes, and in that regard I too would have to say yes. Not to mention the redemption it would give me for the many mistakes in my life and the people I've let down. So redemption, That's a pretty selfish thing to say. Oh, yeah. See, I can't help the selfish gene just showing itself every now and then. But yeah, one other reason that I feel it's the right thing to do is to stay and fight is it would give me the ultimate right to complain about Taiwan. As much as I love the place, there are things that absolutely drive me nuts, and I will often talk about them in my videos, to which some Taiwanese people will comment, who do you think you are? You're not even Taiwanese, you don't have a passport, you don't have the right to vote here, so keep your mouth shut, and if you don't like our country, then get out. Yes, there are people that will write that kind of comment, and to some extent, they do have a right to say that, because yes, I don't have a passport, I don't have the right to vote, all I have is this silly little YouTube channel sharing my life here. But if I state publicly here on the channel that I am willing to fight and defend the place, and then I go on to prove that by doing so in future, it will give me the ultimate credibility to talk openly and honestly on the channel about Taiwan as a Taiwanese person that's put his money where his mouth is. Is that the right expression? Money where your mouth is? Even if they never give me a passport or the right to vote, I will know deep down inside that what I said was true, and I was willing to put my life on the line to defend this country, and not just for this country, for the whole world, for freedom, for democracy. God, I sound so contrived. But it's true. It's all true. Everything I'm saying comes from my heart. I think that's everything I want to say. I don't want to flog a dead horse and keep going on about it. And I'm sure hundreds of you will have some very strong opinions on what I've said, and of course what Prozzie said on his video too. So please comment down below with whatever you've got to say. English or Chinese comments, as I said, I'll get back to all of you. And I'm really looking forward to the comment section on this video because it is such a sensitive topic. If you haven't seen Prozzie's video, then definitely go check it out, as my title is heavily inspired by his. And if you enjoy watching me and Prozzie talk about these kind of serious things, then you're probably going to enjoy the sponsor of today's video, which is the Allan and Prozzie podcast, where we get together once a week, have an hour and a half chat, a couple of beers, and we discuss anything and everything that goes on in our lives here in Taiwan, whether it's talking about the war in Ukraine or possibility of war in Taiwan, or the possibility of one of our ex-girlfriends setting our scooter on fire. It's all there. But yeah, if you want to follow the Allan and Prozzie podcast, then please click the link in the description, top comment down below, and come and show us some love and support. But I think that's pretty much it. Time to say goodbye, continue my walk, and yeah, as for now and as always, I'll see you next time in My Life in Taiwan. Peace. Bye-bye.